At Helwell Bay near Watchet, the cliffs have become a major cause for concern. Because they're so soft, they're crumbling into the sea. The bay and the headland known as Splash Point have recently been echoing to the sound of diggers, lorries and bulldozers working on the latest scheme to protect the cliffs from the destructive power of the Bristol Channel waters. Several miles of coastline are affected by erosion, and records show that for most of this century the sea has been eating into the land at the rate of a foot a year. But over the last decade that rate has been accelerating, and people who own property right on the edge of the cliffs have been getting increasingly worried. The nearest thing to a disaster came in 1978 when a huge landslip occurred at this point, endangering the line used by the West Somerset Railway. As it's an important tourist attraction, the County Council felt it had to be rescued, and they reconstructed the cliff. The new scheme, though, involves the placing of large boulders along the foot of the weakest sections. This is seen as both a cheaper and longer-term answer to the problem. It's cost £190,000, and the County Council engineer responsible for the scheme, John Henton, explains where the money's coming from.
Half of the cost will be met by the County Council, and the other half by the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. The District Council are the Coast Protection Authority for this area. We're not the Coast Protection Authority, but we are obviously interested in the future of the railway line. And so as far the District Council have made application to the Ministry of Agriculture for a grant, and they have accepted that, and so we are getting money towards the cost.
Now, you see, you've mentioned the railway line. Are we right in assuming then that if the railway line were not in jeopardy, all of this would have gone and the people who live here would have just had to take their chances?
Yes, I think that is probably right. It's all a question of value. I mean, on the East Coast, they are facing the same difficulties. We are facing the problem here. And when you're dealing with coast protection work, it is very expensive. And you really have to have a very valuable asset behind it before you can contemplate doing something about it.
Well, the railway clearly is vital as an asset to this part of the county. The people who live in the houses and farm the land here, their homes and their land is valuable to them. What options do they have to protect themselves?
They can purely rely on the Coast Protection Authority doing something about it. In this case, it would be the West Somerset District Council. But of course, money for coast defences is very hard to come by. There's so many commitments in an area, and it has to be a very valuable asset. I can well understand the difficulties of the local people who face the problem. It may be that one day, with the rising values of property, the equation will change a little bit. But at the moment, the problem is there, and unless the asset is particularly valuable, nothing will be done.
So they just have to live with the fact that each year they see their land or their homes slipping further into the sea?
Yes, if you choose to be on the coast, you have a problem if the area is soft, and it's really a problem that you have to face.
That's certainly a daunting thought, and I suppose one can only hope that funds will eventually be found for a more comprehensive scheme to protect this very vulnerable stretch of coast. Watchet, which has a history going back 1,000 years, is still a commercial port. In past centuries, it earned its living mostly from fishing and coastal trade, importing coal from South Wales and exporting local raw materials like iron ore, alabaster and gypsum. Today, the two main cargoes handled are timber and waste paper. This shipload is on its way abroad, but up in the town, the Wandsborough paper mill recycles 2,000 tonnes of waste paper every week. They produce more paper here than at any other mill in Britain, and it's very heartening to know that 95% of it comes from such unwanted items as yesterday's papers, junk mail, and shredded computer printouts. Is sprayed out through a long, thin slit and forms a film at the rate of 900 feet a minute. It then takes just 30 seconds to complete the process. The never-ending sheet is collected on rolls which, when full, weigh 5 tons and contain 5 miles of new paper. There's a curious legend attached to Watchett's parish church, St Decumans. It claims that a lady called Florence Wyndham, who was buried here in 1596, had actually been buried here once before, 37 years earlier. A few days after her marriage to John Wyndham, she apparently had some sort of fit and died. So she was brought here to the church and laid to rest in the family vault. Now, the sexton had noticed that she was buried wearing a lot of very valuable rings, and he decided they'd be far more use to him alive than to her dead. So that night he came to steal the rings. And when he discovered that he couldn't actually pull them off, he took a knife and began to cut at her fingers. Now, to his horror, blood started to flow. Then the body moved, and Florence got up. She'd come back to life. He, of course, fled in terror, while she staggered home. That must have been some family reunion. The Wyndhams were lords of the manor of Watchett, and it was one of Florence's descendants, Sir William, who presided over what was probably the town's most prosperous period. That came in the late 17th century, when he and the local collector of customs actively encouraged the very profitable industry of smuggling. Today, it's the profitable industry of tourism that's being encouraged, and it's playing an increasingly important role in the economy of this ancient port. Visitors can now learn more about its long history in a museum that's been set up in the old market house in the centre of the town. A number of the exhibits were provided by local historian and author Ben Norman, and those dearest to his heart recall the trades that flourished in the days of sail.
Well, these are shipwrights' tools. Quite a lot of ships were built at Watchett at one time, and many of them were repaired by the shipwrights. This, for instance, is a shipwright's caulking mallet. This was used to ram the caulking cotton into the seams of the ship. They had to use these tools as well. These are caulking irons, you see.
And that's what made them waterproof in the joints?
That's right.
Yes. And the tar brush?
Yes, that was very necessary. They went over it with this tar brush. This is a real, genuine tar brush from the old sailing ships.
Still actually got some genuine old tar on there.
Yes, it is. A bit smoky.
I always think the adze is a wonderful piece of equipment, really, because for all that it's such a large and heavy item, the men used to do some very delicate work with it, didn't they?
Yes, they could shape timbers very, very finely with these tools. This one actually belonged to a shipwright called Neil Besley, one of the last that I can remember.
What about this cabinet here, then?
Well, many of my father's things are here. He was a master mariner, and of course, aboard these sailing ships, they had to turn their hand to everything. And this is his ditty bag, where he carried all his small tools in this little bag, you see.
And I recognise what that one is, because that's it's a sailmaker's palm, isn't it? Because my grandfather had one of these.
That's right.
Yes.
It is the palm, yes. It was necessary because the canvas was so thick and heavy. He would have to force the needle through the canvas, and he would push that against the needle and push the needle through with his palm.
Actually, it's lovely because you've managed to keep all of these things in the family, haven't you? You've got a complete set of sailmaker's tools there.
Yes, there is. Here's the serving mallet, his fid, and his marling spike.
You're very fortunate here because you've got a tremendous collection of photographs, haven't you?
Yes, we've got a nice lot of photographs. These show the mineral railway and the iron ore mines. That was a big industry at Watchett at one time. And some of the photographs in the museum are very early ones because we had a photographer this year taking photographs in 1860.
So you've got wonderful early photographs of Watchett Harbour with the schooners and all those lovely masted vessels in it.
Yes, we have. We had some very interesting ones.
Tremendous way to trace the history of the port, as are the paintings that you've got by Mr. Thomas Chidgey.
Yes, he was a master mariner and also a marine artist, so his paintings show everything correct aboard the vessel. He knew what he was doing, and the people who commissioned his painting would be very critical if the paintings were not correct. So you've got a good record there with these marine paintings of the ships of that day.
The harbour is used by small pleasure craft too, and I've joined a boat that's putting out to sea on a fishing trip. Stephen Yendall is the owner of the boat, and for him, being tossed around like a cork whilst anchored out in the middle of the Bristol Channel is a way of life. He earns his living hiring his boat to anglers and gives them the benefit of his expert knowledge on where to fish in different tidal and weather conditions. That skill makes him, and just a few others like him, the nearest modern equivalent to the fishermen of old.
There's no commercial fishing going on as such in the area. I bring parties out to bottom fish with rod and line, catching dogfish, cod, conger and skates, mackerel of course in the season, depending on what's moving at the time.
Who are the people that come fishing? Are they holiday makers mostly?
In the summer, subject to the weather of course, we bring holiday makers out, but 12 months of the year, and certainly right through the winter, it's parties, it's clubs, pub clubs, angling clubs, and just groups of friends that work together and choose they want to fish together.
I should think the tides must be the bane of your life out here, aren't they?
Absolutely. We're totally dependent on the tides. We run 5-hour trips in the summer for the holiday makers, working over the top of the tide, which means we can get back into the harbour at any point. The 8-hour trips that we run between the tides, the harbour dries completely, so of course we're stuck out here. If the weather should change all of a sudden, we just got to make the most of it, running for shelter where possible.
Do you ever have problems with people getting seasick?
We do get a fair amount of seasickness on board. Most people that are sensible, not to have too much to drink the night before and really just act normally, eat what they normally eat, there's not too much of a problem. But obviously every now and again we do get people that are pretty ill and they got to make the most of it.
Well, no bites so far, but there's still a few hours left on this tide. Meanwhile, I'm returned to dry land so that I can make my way to the northern fringe of the Brendan Hills. Here in the valley of the Washford River, there are some remarkable medieval buildings. This is Cleve Abbey, a Cistercian monastery founded at the end of the 12th century. And what makes it so special is that it survived virtually intact into the 20th century. By good fortune, it was only the church that was demolished here when Henry VIII abolished the monastic system. Most other monasteries were completely destroyed. It was originally called the Abbey of the Blessed Virgin in the Flower Valley, but in fact its vast estates weren't restricted just to the area around the Washford River. It owned most of the property in the surrounding area. It was endowed with land as far away as Devon and Cornwall, and it even had right over shipwrecks on its coastal properties. Nevertheless, it was never a particularly wealthy community, and in fact, at one time, it was heavily in debt to London merchants. Even so, it always gave very generously to charity and was renowned for the hospitality it offered to travellers in what was a very remote part of the country. And despite its apparent size, it wasn't a big monastery. There were never more than 25 to 30 monks here at any one time. The main reason the buildings have survived so well is that they were first turned into a house and then into a working farm, which meant that they weren't just abandoned to the elements. Their true historical and architectural worth only began to be appreciated about 100 years ago, and since then they've been carefully restored. Excavations have also revealed an area paved with heraldic tiles, which formed the floor of a 13th century dining hall. It's a magnificent example of early tile making. The wonderfully peaceful atmosphere of the abbey is in stark contrast to the tannery in the nearby village of Old Cleve. Here they carry on a tradition that's believed to have been started on this very site by the monks themselves. The present business dates back to the end of the last century, when a local farmer, John Wood, took over what was then technically a fellmongery. That is, a place that produces leather. And in due course it began to specialise in sheepskin products. Today it processes 75,000 skins a year, and not only supplies shops all over the country, but also produces most of the sheepskin items bought by holidaymakers in this part of the world. This is Washford Station, not far from Cleve Abbey, and just about to depart one of the steam trains that are a summertime feature of the West Somerset Railway.